The first time my husband called me unstable, he said it gently, like he was worried about me. We were sitting in our living room, the expensive one, the one with the marble floors and the giant windows and the furniture people only buy when they want others to believe they're winning at life. He reached across the coffee table and touched my hand. "Emma," he said softly, "I think you've been under a lot of stress." I remember the exact way he said my name. Slow, careful, like he was talking to a child. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even pull my hand away. I just nodded. That was my first mistake. Or maybe my first move. My name is Emma Caldwell. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was invisible. Not in the dramatic way, not the kind of invisible where people ignore you on the street. I was the useful kind of invisible, the kind men marry. I met Richard Caldwell when I was 21. He was 29. Confident, well-spoken, already successful enough to look impressive, but hungry enough to look ambitious. He worked in private equity, the kind of job where people never really understand what you do, but they nod respectfully anyway. I was finishing college. I worked part-time at a financial consulting firm, mostly data entry and reports. Richard noticed me because I listened. That's what he told people later. "She really listens," he'd say. "Asks smart questions." What he meant was, I didn't challenge him. We married 2 years later. Small ceremony, elegant. His parents paid. My parents smiled politely and stayed quiet. From the outside, our life looked perfect. And for a long time, I worked very hard to keep it that way. I managed our household. I organized his schedule. I handled the bills. I hosted dinners for his colleagues and made sure the wine was the right temperature and the conversations never got uncomfortable. When Richard started his own investment firm, I helped him build it. Not officially. My name wasn't on anything, but I reviewed contracts, I proofread proposals, I flagged inconsistencies in financial statements that his junior analysts missed. When deals went well, Richard celebrated. When they went badly, he came home angry. And somehow, it was always my fault. "You distract me," he'd say. Or, "You don't understand pressure." Or my personal favorite, "You wouldn't get it. This is adult stuff." I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped correcting him in front of others. I stopped disagreeing. People mistook my silence for weakness. That was convenient. The first time he cheated, I didn't know. The second time, I suspected. By the third time, I was certain. But I stayed. Not because I loved him, not because I was afraid, but because I was paying attention. Here's something no one tells you. When people think you're broken, they stop hiding things from you. They talk freely. They make mistakes. They assume you're too emotional to understand numbers. That assumption would cost Richard everything. The real turning point came on a random Wednesday night. Richard had a dinner meeting. Again, I stayed home. I was reviewing some files on his laptop, something I'd done 1,000 times before, when I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It wasn't hidden, just oddly named. RC Personal. Curiosity isn't dangerous. Arrogance is. I opened it. Inside were documents that didn't match the story I'd been living in. Accounts I didn't recognize. Transfers that didn't line up with reported profits. Loans secured against assets I thought were paid off years ago. At first, I assumed there was an explanation. There always is. Until there isn't. I stayed up all night. I followed the numbers. And somewhere around 3:40 a.m., sitting alone at our kitchen island, I realized something that made my hands shake. We weren't rich. We were pretending. Richard's firm was drowning in debt. Personal guarantees, risky leverage, quiet settlements. The house? Refinanced twice. The cars? Leased. The investments he bragged about at parties? Mostly smoke. And the worst part? He'd been positioning everything carefully. Not for success, for escape. That's when I understood why he'd started calling me unstable, why he'd encouraged me to see a therapist, why he'd casually mentioned mental health evaluations in conversations with his lawyer friends. He wasn't worried about me. He was building a narrative. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't tell a soul. Instead, I started documenting, quietly, patiently, every account, every liability, every signature. And then I waited. 3 months later, Richard sat me down at that same coffee table. The marble floors were polished. The house smelled like money. "I think we should separate," he said. "No emotion, no apology, just strategy. I'll take care of everything. I'll make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable. Like a chair. Like an expense." What he didn't know was that the woman sitting across from him was no longer invisible. She was counting. When Richard said he would take care of everything, he meant he would take control of the house, of the money, of the story. He gave me a week to move into the guest room, not because he needed the space, but because he needed the message to land. The guest room had always been perfect, unused, neutral, forgettable. By moving me there, Richard wasn't just rearranging furniture, he was rearranging power, and everyone noticed. His mother noticed first. Margaret Caldwell arrived 2 days after the separation talk, unannounced. Perfect hair, perfect posture, a look that said she had already decided who was at fault. She hugged me lightly, the kind of hug you give someone you don't respect. "This is such a difficult time," she said, "for Richard. Not for us, for him." She walked through the house like an appraiser, paused at furniture, touched surfaces, mentally dividing things that were already emotionally gone. "I suppose you'll want to take a few personal items," she said carefully. "Of course, anything of real value will need to stay." I smiled. I nodded. I let her believe that was enough. The next day, Richard canceled my credit card. He said it was temporary, just until things settle, he explained. I thanked him. That confused him. The truth is, I had already opened a separate account, months ago, in my own name, with money he had never noticed because he never believed I could manage it. Here's what people like Richard don't understand. They don't watch what they don't value, and they never valued me. Word spread quickly. Among his friends, among his colleagues, Richard told everyone the same thing. "Emma's not well. She's overwhelmed. She doesn't really understand the finances." He said it kindly. That made it worse. I started noticing changes. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. People avoided eye contact. His lawyer stopped speaking directly to me. Perfect. That's exactly when people start slipping. 2 weeks after the separation, Richard brought her home. He didn't ask, he didn't warn me. She walked into my kitchen like it belonged to her. Young, polished, confident in the way only someone protected by someone else's money can be. Her name was Lila Grant. She worked at his firm. Of course she did. They sat on the couch together, my couch, his arm around her waist. She looked at me once, just once, with curiosity. Not guilt. I left the room without a word. Richard smiled like he'd won something. That night, I added another folder to my collection. Evidence of personal conduct, conflict of interest, unreported compensation. Lila was expensive and Richard was careless. The humiliation escalated. The joint account was frozen, the car keys were taken. I was advised to start looking for a smaller place. All very reasonable, all very legal, on the surface. What Richard didn't realize was that I had already hired a lawyer, Sophia Reyes, 54, sharp, unimpressed. She didn't pity me. That's why I chose her. She reviewed my documentation in silence. page after page. Then she looked up. "You've been watching him for a long time." I nodded. "He thinks you're weak," she said. I smiled. "That's convenient." Sophia leaned back in her chair. "If we do this correctly," she said slowly, "he's going to ask for exactly the wrong thing." I moved into a small apartment, 1 bedroom, old building, quiet. Richard told everyone I couldn't afford better. I let him. I unpacked slowly, and every night I waited. Because men like Richard don't just leave, they announce their victory, and when they do, they make their biggest mistake. Richard filed first. He did it publicly, aggressively, with confidence that bordered on arrogance. The petition was thick, polished, designed to intimidate. Full custody, of reputation, minimal spousal support, immediate asset protection. He asked for everything that would force me to react. I didn't. When the papers arrived, I was eating dinner alone. Pasta, cheap wine, quiet. I finished my meal before opening the envelope. That detail matters, because panic never makes good decisions. Sophia read the filing the next morning. She laughed once, not kindly. "He thinks this is about money," she said. She underlined a paragraph with her pen. "And he thinks you'll fight emotionally." She closed the folder. That's his blind spot. We responded with something unexpected. I asked for nothing. No house, no car, no retirement accounts, just a clean separation. Richard was thrilled. That terrified his lawyer. The first hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Word spread quickly. His firm took interest. His parents took seats. Lila didn't attend, yet. The courtroom was cold, sterile, designed to flatten emotion. Richard sat confidently beside his attorney. Expensive suit, relaxed posture. He smiled at me once, sympathy disguised as victory. I didn't look back. The judge skimmed the documents, paused, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "is this correct?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "You're declining any claim to marital assets?" "Yes." A murmur spread through the room. Richard's smile widened. The judge leaned forward. "Do you understand what that means?" "I do." Silence. Then, "Very well." The gavel didn't strike, but the decision landed anyway. Outside the courtroom, Richard pulled me aside. He lowered his voice. "You didn't have to do this," he said. I tilted my head. "Do what?" "Make yourself look so small." I smiled. That was never my fear. That night, Richard celebrated. Dinner, drinks, laughter. He told Lila it was almost over. He told his parents I was being gracious. He told his friends I was finally letting go. Men like Richard confuse silence with surrender. 2 days later, his firm received an anonymous inquiry, a compliance review request. Routine, polite, thorough. Signed by a name they didn't recognize. By the end of the week, his name was flagged. Nothing serious, just questions. Travel expenses, client billing overlaps, internal relationship disclosures. Richard wasn't worried. Yet. Sophia called me that evening. "They're opening files," she said. I poured a drink. "Good." "And Richard just authorized a major transfer," she added. I stopped pouring. "To where?" "To a holding account," she said. "He's trying to protect assets." I smiled slowly. Let him. The second hearing was scheduled sooner than expected. This time the courtroom was full, not because of us, but because rumors had started. The judge entered. The room rose. He sat, looked directly at Richard. "Mr. Caldwell," he said calmly, "before we proceed," he paused, "I need to ask you about a transaction made 3 days ago." Richard's lawyer stiffened. "What transaction?" Richard asked. The judge lifted a document. "You transferred significant funds out of your primary account." The room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet. Real quiet. Richard swallowed. "That's unrelated." The judge looked at me, then back at him. "We'll see." I didn't smile. I didn't move. I didn't need to, because the moment had arrived. Richard cleared his throat. His lawyer leaned in, whispering fast. Too fast. That's how I knew they hadn't prepared for this. The transfer was a precaution, his lawyer said smoothly. Standard practice during pending divorce proceedings. The judge didn't argue. He simply nodded. Then he asked the question that mattered. Was the court informed before the transfer? Silence. Richard looked at his lawyer. His lawyer didn't look back. No, Your Honor, the lawyer finally said. But again, this was... The judge raised a hand. I'll decide what it was. He made a note, a small one, but small notes ruin big lives. Outside the courtroom, Richard was suddenly less relaxed. His voice lost its softness. What did you do? He asked me. I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. Nothing, I said, and for once it was true. The pressure didn't hit him all at once. That's not how real consequences work. They arrive quietly, professionally, with polite emails and scheduled meetings. His firm asked him to clarify a few expense reports. Clients requested different account managers. Lila stopped coming around, not because she knew everything, but because she felt something shift. People sense instability before they understand it. Sophia kept me informed. He's talking too much, she said one afternoon, to the wrong people. I smiled. That's unlike him. No, she corrected, that's exactly like him, when he thinks he's still in control. The third hearing was announced. This one wasn't about assets. It was about disclosure. Richard didn't sleep the night before. I know because he texted me at 2:14 a.m. We should talk. I didn't reply. The courtroom felt different this time, less confident, less forgiving. The judge reviewed new documents, emails, transfers, undisclosed relationships. Lila's name appeared once, then again, then too many times to explain away. Richard's lawyer stood. We object to relevance. The judge looked unimpressed. Overruled. That word landed like a fracture. Mr. Caldwell, said the judge, were you in a personal relationship with a subordinate employee? Richard hesitated, a second too long. Yes, he said. After separation? Another pause. Yes. And did you disclose this to your firm? Richard swallowed. No. The room shifted. You could feel it. That was the moment people stopped rooting for him. Outside, reporters waited. Not for me, for him. That bothered him more than anything. Lila didn't answer his calls anymore. His mother stopped defending him. His father didn't speak at all. Sophia closed her file. He's exposed, but not finished. I nodded. I know. Because the real damage doesn't happen in court. It happens when people realize the story they believed was wrong. That night, Richard's firm placed him on leave. Temporary, administrative, but those words carry weight. He came to my apartment, unannounced, uninvited, standing in the hallway like a stranger. I don't understand, he said. His voice was tired, for the first time. I crossed my arms. You never tried to. He looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me clearly might fix something. It didn't, because once power shifts, it never shifts back quietly. Richard didn't come inside. He stayed in the hallway, like he understood, finally, that this was no longer his space. I need you to help me, he said. Not us, me. I leaned against the doorframe. Help was the one thing he had never asked for before, only assumed. They're asking questions I can't answer, he continued. My firm, the bank, the board. I waited. Silence makes people reveal themselves. You know how to explain things, he said. You always did. There it was, the compliment disguised as expectation. I'm not your interpreter anymore, I said. His face tightened. You don't have to do this. I raised an eyebrow. Do what? Make this worse. I smiled faintly. I'm not making anything. The investigation expanded. Not because I pushed, but because once attention turns, it doesn't stop at the surface. Emails surfaced. Old ones Richard forgot existed. Conversations where I had warned him, advised him, corrected him, quietly. The narrative changed. She was more involved than we thought. She handled more than we realized. She wasn't just a wife. That frightened him, because the thing he had erased was now being documented. The fourth hearing was brief, devastating. The judge issued a temporary freeze, not on my accounts, on his. Richard's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge denied it. Margaret didn't sit with him anymore. She sat alone, her posture rigid, her mouth tight. Outside the courtroom, a reporter asked me a question. "Do you feel vindicated?" I answered honestly, "No." That answer traveled further than anger ever could. Lila resigned, quietly. Her name disappeared from his firm's website, just like mine had once disappeared from his life. That night, Sophia called. "It's almost time," she said. "For what?" For him to ask. The message came at 11:47 p.m. "I'll give you anything." I didn't respond, because desperation always sounds like generosity, and I was done accepting either. The final hearing was scheduled. This one would decide everything: assets, reputation, future. Richard looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence. He spoke less. He listened more. Too late. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. The room went quiet, not because I was loud, because I was unexpected. "I don't want his money," I said calmly. Murmurs. "I want the record corrected." The judge leaned forward. "In what way?" I looked at Richard, then back at the judge. For years, I was presented as uninvolved. I paused, unaware. I placed a folder on the table. I was neither. Sophia opened it. Documents slid forward. Timelines, authorizations, approvals. My handwriting, my initials. Richard closed his eyes, just once. The judge studied the evidence, longer than he had studied anything else. "This changes things," he said. I exhaled, slowly, because the truth doesn't rush. The judge didn't speak right away. He flipped through the documents again, slower this time, as if rereading them might change what they meant. They didn't. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said finally, "why wasn't this information presented earlier?" I met his eyes. "Because no one asked," I said. A simple answer, a devastating one. Richard's lawyer stood. "We object to the characterization." The judge raised a hand. "No," he said calmly, "you may sit." That was the moment, not when the gavel struck, not when the ruling came, but when Richard's lawyer obeyed without argument. The judge turned back to me. "You were actively involved in these decisions?" "Yes." "And yet you asked for nothing?" "Yes." "Why?" I paused. "Not for effect, for accuracy." "Because I didn't need to take what was already mine," I said. "I needed the truth acknowledged." The room went still, not tense, respectful. Richard looked at me then, not angry, not confused, afraid, because for the first time he understood what he had been standing next to all these years. The judge nodded slowly. "I see." He made another note, larger than the others. "Given this information," he continued, "I am ordering a full forensic review." Richard's head snapped up. "That won't be necessary." The judge didn't look at him. "It is now." The courtroom reacted before anyone spoke. People shifted, whispers spread. Richard's mother pressed her lips together so tightly they turned white. The review didn't take long, because truth, when documented, moves faster than lies ever can. Within days, the narrative outside the courtroom collapsed. Articles changed tone. Headlines softened toward me, hardened toward him. Executive placed on extended leave. Firm cites ethical concerns. Divorce case reveals internal oversight failures. My name appeared differently now, not as an afterthought, as a factor. Richard called again. I didn't answer. He emailed. I didn't respond. Then came the message that mattered. I underestimated you. I deleted it. The final ruling arrived quietly. No drama, no applause, just words on paper. The judge granted a revised settlement, not because I asked, because the court insisted. A share of assets, acknowledgement of contribution, a public correction. Richard didn't contest it. He couldn't, not without reopening everything. I left the courthouse alone. No press, no entourage, just clean air and steady ground. That night I sat in my apartment. Same one, same chair, same quiet. But something had shifted. Not around me, inside me. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. It's precise. It's patient. And when it's done right, it doesn't leave room for arguments. Because the most dangerous woman in the room isn't the one who shouts. It's the one who waits. Winning doesn't feel the way people expect. There was no rush, no surge of triumph, just a quiet settling, like dust after a storm. The revised settlement was finalized within weeks, efficient, uncontested, unavoidable. Richard signed without comment. His signature looked smaller than it used to. The firm issued a statement, carefully worded, legally safe, but behind closed doors, his office was emptied, his name removed from active cases. Not fired, not forgiven, suspended in professional limbo. That's worse. I declined interviews, not because I was afraid of the spotlight, because I understood its cost. Silence, used correctly, travels further. Sophia met me for coffee, first time outside an office. She studied me over the rim of her cup. "You know," she said, "you could have destroyed him completely." I nodded. "I know. And you chose not to." "I chose accuracy." She smiled. "That's rarer." Richard moved out of the city. No announcement, no farewell. Just absence. People filled it with their own conclusions. Most of them weren't kind. Lila took a job overseas. Her social media vanished. Reinvention is easier when accountability doesn't follow you. My name began circulating quietly, not in gossip columns, in professional circles, boards, advisory panels, consulting conversations. People who had read the case, people who had noticed the pattern. They didn't ask what I wanted, they asked what I saw. That difference mattered. One evening, months later, I ran into Margaret, by accident, a charity event. She looked older, tired. She hesitated before approaching me. "I misjudged you," she said. I nodded. "I know." She waited for forgiveness. I offered courtesy. That was enough. At home, I boxed the last of the documents. Not to forget, to file them away. Power isn't about holding on, it's about knowing you can let go. I started sleeping better, not because life was perfect, but because nothing was unresolved. People still ask how I did it, what my strategy was, what my breaking point had been. The truth is simpler. I paid attention when no one thought I mattered, and when the moment came, I spoke once. That was enough. Because the most permanent victories aren't the ones you celebrate. They're the ones that change how people see you, long after the story ends. I thought it was over. That was my first mistake. Not because I underestimated Richard again, but because men like him don't disappear quietly. They rewrite themselves. 3 months after the final ruling, my name appeared somewhere unexpected. A compliance memo. Internal, confidential, forwarded to me anonymously. It claimed I had withheld material information during the marriage, that I had allowed misreporting to continue, that my silence had been strategic. The accusation wasn't criminal. It was worse. It was ethical. The kind that doesn't send you to jail, but closes doors without ever explaining why. I read the memo twice. Then a third time, slowly, because I recognized the language. I had lived with it for 12 years. Richard hadn't attacked me directly. He had done something smarter. He had planted doubt. Boards hesitated. Invitations paused. Conversations cooled. No one accused me openly. They didn't need to. Sophia was furious. "This is retaliation," she said. "We can shut it down." I shook my head. "Not yet." She stared at me. "This could damage everything you've built." I nodded. "I know. Because this time, I didn't want to win in court. I wanted to win everywhere else. I requested one meeting, just one, a private ethics panel, closed doors, no press, no lawyers speaking for me, just facts. Richard didn't attend, but his fingerprints were all over it. They asked careful questions, polite ones, questions designed to test character, not legality. "Why didn't you speak sooner?" one of them asked. I didn't rush. Because silence wasn't deception. It was survival. They waited. I continued. And when survival ended, I documented everything. I slid one final folder across the table. Not new evidence, old evidence, time-stamped, archived, ignored for years. Emails where I warned of risks, memos where I flagged concerns, notes requesting audits. All unanswered, all dismissed. The room changed, not suddenly, but decisively. One panel member leaned back. "This memo," he said, tapping the accusation, "won't stand." Another nodded. "In fact," she added, "it raises questions about who authored it." I didn't smile. I didn't thank them. I simply stood. Because this wasn't about approval. It was about final authority. 2 weeks later, Richard's name surfaced again, not in headlines, in footnotes, the most dangerous place of all. Source of misleading internal communication identified. That single line ended him. He emailed me once more, the last time. I just wanted to level the field. I didn't reply, because the field had never been uneven. He had just never noticed who was standing beside him. I didn't plan to speak publicly. That's important, because when something is planned, people assume it's strategic. This wasn't. It was inevitable. The conference was supposed to be boring, annual, predictable, panels and coffee and polite applause, ethics, governance, oversight. The kind of event no one clips for social media. Until my name appeared on the program. Final panel, final speaker. No headline, just credentials. I walked onto the stage calmly. No notes, no dramatics. The room wasn't hostile. It was indifferent. That's worse. I spoke for 12 minutes. Not about Richard, not about divorce, not about revenge. I spoke about patterns, how misconduct survives, how silence is misinterpreted, how institutions reward confidence over accuracy. Then I said one sentence, just one, the one that changed everything. The most dangerous misconduct I ever witnessed wasn't hidden, it was ignored. The room stilled, phones lifted, people leaned forward. I continued. I documented concerns for years. They were dismissed, not because they were wrong, but because they came from someone no one thought mattered. I paused. Not for drama, for clarity. I was married to the executive in question. The room shifted, audibly. I didn't say Richard's name. I didn't need to. Everyone already knew. I finished with this. Accountability doesn't begin when someone breaks the rules. It begins when someone tells the truth and no one listens. That was it. No accusations, no tears, no spectacle. The clip went viral by morning, not because it was loud, because it was precise. Headlines followed. Former executive's ex-wife sparks ethics reckoning. Quiet testimony raises new questions. Oversight failure, not personal vendetta. Panels invited me. Boards reached out. Universities asked me to speak. Not about marriage, about governance. Richard wasn't mentioned often, but when he was, the tone had changed, permanently. A journalist emailed me, asked for comment. "Do you feel this was revenge?" I replied with one line. "No, this was documentation." That response was quoted everywhere. Richard disappeared completely after that, not publicly, professionally. His network collapsed, silently. People think public moments are explosions. They're not. They're confirmations. And that day, the world finally confirmed what I had known all along.
Fame doesn't arrive loudly when you don't chase it. It settles, quietly. Like dust on a shelf no one expected anyone to notice. After the conference, life didn't explode, it clarified. Emails came from people who had once overlooked me. Boards I had never been considered for asked for my opinion, not because of who I had been married to, but because of what I had seen. Richard's name stopped appearing altogether, not in scandals, not in defenses, just absence, the kind that tells you a story ended without redemption. I never spoke about him again, not in interviews, not in private, not even to myself. Some chapters don't deserve reflection, only closure. Months later, I received a message from a junior analyst. She wrote, "I heard your talk. I started documenting everything, just in case." I stared at that line for a long time, because that was the moment. Not the courtroom, not the headlines. That was when I knew it had mattered. Power doesn't announce itself when it wins. It leaves instructions behind. I moved apartments, not because I needed more space, but because I wanted light, the kind that doesn't ask permission. On my last night in the old place, I found a note I had written years ago, folded, faded. "Pay attention. One day it will matter." I smiled, because it finally had. People still ask what I lost. A marriage, a name, a life I thought was permanent. They ask if it was worth it. Here's the truth. I didn't lose power. I returned it to where it had always been, because the most dangerous woman isn't the one who fights, it's the one who waits, documents, and speaks only when the room is ready to listen. And when she does, the story doesn't end with revenge, it ends with silence.